With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The White House said President Donald Trump will not back down from demands for strict immigration enforcement in Minnesota following unrest in Minneapolis. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump has urged Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and other leaders to fully cooperate with federal authorities by transferring criminal illegal immigrants to federal custody and assisting immigration and customs enforcement in arrests and detentions. The administration argues cooperation is necessary to restore public safety after 2 fatal shootings involving federal agents and ongoing protests tied to Operation Metro Surge. Minnesota officials have pushed back, calling for independent investigations and reduced federal presence, while Trump has sent border czar Tom Homan to oversee operations and coordinate fraud probes. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will support diplomatic security arrangements linked to the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics, Italian and U.S. officials confirmed. Organizers said ICE agents would be present to protect high-ranking U.S. officials and would not conduct immigration enforcement, with all security remaining under Italian authority. ICE said its Homeland Security Investigations Unit will assist in vetting and mitigating risks from transnational crime. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will attend the opening ceremony. The involvement has drawn political backlash in Italy, with centrist parties criticizing ICE's presence following recent scrutiny of the agency after fatal incidents during U.S. immigration operations. Sweden's government announced plans to lower the age of criminal responsibility to 13 for the most serious crimes, aiming to curb gangs' growing use of children in violent crime. Under proposals from the governing coalition, the change would apply to offenses such as murder and attempted murder and be phased in over 5 years. The plan would also remove reduced sentencing for offenders aged 18 to 20 and raise the maximum prison term for minors. Officials said criminal networks increasingly recruit teenagers, sometimes deploying them across borders. While critics warn of criminalizing children, Justice Minister Gunnar Stromer said the measures reflect an urgent public safety crisis. French lawmakers have approved a bill banning social media use for children under 15 and prohibiting mobile phones in high schools, with the measure expected to take effect in September. The legislation passed the National Assembly by a wide margin and now heads to the Senate after President Emmanuel Macron requested fast-tracking. Macron said the ban is supported by scientific recommendations and public opinion, citing concerns over children's mental health and exposure to harmful content. The law aligns with the EU's Digital Services Act and excludes educational and open-source platforms. The vote follows similar debates in other countries, including the UK and Australia, as Europe considers stricter online protections for minors. Former UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman said the Conservative Party is effectively finished, arguing it's impossible to defend its record or believe in its future policies. Speaking after defecting to Nigel Farage's Reform UK, Braverman said her break with the Conservatives had been years in the making, dating back to Brexit. She accused party colleagues of abusing and marginalizing her for pushing policies such as cutting immigration, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, and confronting Islamist extremism. Braverman said she was ignored and later sacked for raising concerns about policing and anti-Semitism, claiming the party has been overtaken by centrists and no longer represents conservative principles. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke about his scathing indictment of Gavin Newsom in Davos.
I used to be a teacher, and there's always one poor kid in the class who can't keep up and gets very frustrated. We know Kamala Harris couldn't keep up, so she would start laughing. Tim Walz would start shaking. Gavin Newsom lashes out. And I believe Gavin Newsom had to go all the way to Switzerland to see all the CEOs that he chased out of California.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around.
And then for the defense.
Our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
Safe with me. How long do you think we're gonna stay here for?
Our house, in the middle of our street. Our house, in the middle of our...
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
A very good morning if you're in the UK. It's at 6:09 in the morning. Don't you hate it when that alarm goes off? Oh, man. I'm sure there's a few of you with broken alarms in the corner. Flying at supersonic speeds. It's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's my bloody alarm. And I'm sure many have bruised hands just by thumping it and having to buy a new one. Alexa, shut up. Anyway, that's what we have in the morning. It goes off at 5 to 6. It's a terrible, terrible thing to happen to you, but it keeps happening. I don't know why. Maybe I should see someone. And if you're in Australia, in Brisbane, it's 4 o'clock or 10 after 4. And in Sydney, it's 1 hour in front. And so there you are. It's somewhere in the world it's a particular time. Now we're going to talk about the, the insurrection in Minnesota and the Trump deportation record. What's happening in Minnesota? We see the lovely media, they go to town, don't they? Extensive fraud, though, has been uncovered involving the Somalian community. High-level officials are implicated. Local law enforcement is not actively assisting federal agencies such as ICE, which has left many cold, and has come under attack for arresting illegal immigrants and shootings of 2 civilians in Minneapolis. On top of this, radical external organisations and individuals are funding the violent protest to de-escalate the situation. President Peace Trump has sent in a border czar. His name is Tom Homan, to take over on the ground operations. And I'm just wondering, is this what an insurrection looks like? Joachim Hagopian is going to join us in a sec. We're going to chat about who is behind this mess and where it's likely to end. Joachim, thanks for joining me. We haven't got you, mate. Yes, there you are. You just popped up. Then I pushed a button, and guess what? First of all, how's Thailand?
How's Thailand? Well, Thailand is a pleasure palace here.
So what you do, you go from one paradise to another.
Yeah.
Did you take your water buffalo with you? That's the question.
No, he's back there. He's munching on the grass.
What's its name, by the way?
You know, I never named him.
What? I can't believe it.
It's an unknown world out there, you know, so...
Do you throw a stick? Do you throw a stick, play fetch with it? I don't know. I've never had a water buffalo, by the way, so I wouldn't know. Hey, what's your thoughts on the Minneapolis? And it is chaotic. It's a fiasco. I think from both sides. I think Tim Walz. What a great distraction to distract what should be happening, and that's investigating him along with the Somalians. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like every news story and development unfolding today is a distraction. It's meant to cover up what else is going on, and there's so much going on in this world. Yeah, it's hard to stay up on everything, you know, because it's happening all so fast. You know, I always look at it like it's divide and rule all over again. It seems like every news development is divide and rule. It's basically the controllers. Now, the controllers consist of the City of London. Some people even call them Khazarian Mafia, the crime cabal, the international crime cabal. You can have a lot of different names for it, but it's the people that hold the power of money, and they control pretty much the planet, unfortunately. And so when I look at this particular issue of the divide and rule in Minnesota, you know, it's like the right, which is conservatives, ICE, Trump, you know, the Nazis, you know, the fascists, versus the left, which are, you know, the Marxists, they're funded by the globalists that bring in all the people from south of the border pouring in, you know, the Democrats, the left. They're all the same, you know, as far as the divide and rule, the conservative right versus the liberal left. And so it's big money behind both these factions, and the same controllers are behind both the right and the left divide. So that's what we're seeing played out daily on a violent scale in Minnesota. We see the governor and the cover up of the Somali scandal with the federal government. They're in it together. You know, and so, yeah, it's like, let's bring on the Insurrection Act. This is Trump now, the Trump team and the right. Let's bring on the Insurrection Act. Let's declare national emergency. Let's go full-blown militant police state in America, because that's where Trump and company are headed. And then, of course, the left is out there to say, oh, you're being too brutal. You're shooting American citizens that are exercising their First Amendment free speech rights, public assembly to protest. Come on, you know, I mean, where's our Constitution? All of this. So they play against each other. And that's the dynamic here. And it's the dynamic that runs pretty much in all the breaking news stories today.
Yeah, I'd see that. I see also Governor Tim Walz. What a creep he is. Sorry, this is my own personal opinion. And I may say things that aren't savoury at times. use words such as creep. They are pretty violent. Also, the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, Democratic Republican, now she's great, Ilhan Omar. Shock horror, you will be shocked, by the way, that they are not cooperating. This is where, they can't cooperate because they'll go to jail, won't they?
Yeah, basically, they are all criminal. They're all playing their parts. It's like, it really is almost like a psychodrama, and there's each side, the protagonist and the antagonist, But yeah, there's no good side or bad side. There really isn't. They're both bad as far as the two forces that are clashing in Minneapolis and the United States. I mean, it's a much larger problem, but the epicenter of the unfolding events today, it happens to be Minneapolis. It could be Los Angeles, it could be San Francisco, it could be Seattle, Portland, any of those hot spots, where the left is in control of the state government and the mayors and all that. Yeah, but you just got to look at the bigger picture. Who benefits? Well, who benefits by all the wars? Who benefits by the pandemics that kill people? Who benefits? It's the same ones behind all of this.
Tell me, these shootings, the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretty, have put a lot of pressure on ICE and distractions. What are your thoughts on that? I know one. I mean, the other I'm not too sure about, but one, I think the woman who was killed, she obviously had an episode of some sort and drove straight at the ICE agent. You can't do that. But I did hear also that there is a select group, not a select group, but a group of ICE agents who are about 3 or 4 levels above the others in their own mind, and they are quite, they have no respect for your own rights, and they're very bad. Not the entire ICE agent community, but these ICE agents, there's a few of them, and they sort of are more like following Donald Trump's wishes, but to a very, very the umpth degree. What's your thoughts though on these shootings? I mean, if you have chaos, you're going to have shootings, aren't you?
Yeah, when you bring it to this level of intensity.
Seattle and these places, yeah, they're all good. There's if you have guns or you're going to drive at someone or try and kill someone, you're going to get some sort of retaliation. America, I mean, I love the States, but it seems to be all over the shop at the moment. I mean, you are right. You mentioned it's so political, but if you look at the Democrats, they hate Trump. I mean, look at some of them are moving, to other countries, and many are saying good riddance. But why would you do that? Truly, I mean, we have a terrible prime minister here. He's horrible. It doesn't mean I'm going to hop on the plane and move, where you live with your water buffalo. I'm going to stay here, hang out for a while.
Well, you have to realize that ICE and all the federal agencies, including the metropolitan police departments, the largest cities in America, all train in Israel. What does that tell you? It means that basically we're all Palestinians. That's what it means. They are training to kill. That's the bottom line. And there are trigger-happy guys out there. They actually react in fear sometimes. Now this guy, the Pretty guy that got shot just recently, he had a lawful possession of a firearm on him. They took it away before they shot him. So it's not like these operating ICE officers were in self-defense. They clearly were not. And the same case is with the Good case. She initially was driving into the crowd and then started pulling the steering wheel away when the shots were fired into the windshield that killed her. So, in other words, these guys that are on the front line, yeah, they are in a war. It's a contrived war by the same controllers behind it, but they are each on a side, and they're each are, the right versus left. Yeah, people are all there. I mean, it's almost unheard of now that people have discussions where they actually present their point of view and it's respected. It may not be agreed upon by the other party, but at least the voicing of it is out of respect to hear the other person's point of view and then counter with your own point of view that may be different. That's what civil society does. Unfortunately, there is a breakdown where the right left extreme cannot tolerate any other point of view other than their own. And they resort to combativeness. The fight flight syndrome kicks in the brain, the midbrain, the primitive midbrain, and they're ready to do battle. And this is the way it is. I see colleagues now, fellow journalists, going back and forth, and emails, like just, they're calling each other's, it's like a kids in a playground where they're ready to battle it out. I mean, that's what the world's come to. We've allowed the controllers to have this kind of effect on us where we're all ready to do battle.
What about the guy, the nurse? He had a gun and had magazines.
Lawfully permitted. We have to, and he did not draw that gun whatsoever. He made no motion toward using that weapon. It was taken away from him, and he was unarmed when they shot him. I mean, the facts are the facts.
He had a gun, and he had magazines full. So that would suggest, why would a nurse have a gun with magazines full? Anyway, the courts will work that one out, I would imagine. Well, maybe they won't. Who knows? What do you think about because we have, there are various far left groups and individuals, a guy called Neville Singham. He's a billionaire living in Shanghai. And he and these groups are funding this chaos. That's probably an insurrection. I mean, if we go back to January 6, perhaps, we should also pay a visit to Neville in Shanghai. I like Chinese. And these other far left groups and say, look, we understand you're trying to keep the employment lines smaller and you're paying these people, but unfortunately you're paying them to create chaos, burn down buildings, create a lot of law and order headaches, and you're breaking the law, basically. You can't do that. Come and visit us and we'll visit a judge. Do you think that needs to happen, though? Do you think they need to, Neville and the others need to have a visit from some high-ranking official with a gun?
Yeah, I believe that all of this unrest is caused by big money. Big money. There are ones that are on the left side, and there are ones on the quote conservative right side. But they're oligarchs playing both sides. The divide and rule again. That's the dynamic here. But yeah, it's organized and it's funded by oligarchs, wealthy individuals that are part of, what's called the deep state cabal, or however you want to describe it. But there's an elite group that seems to be manifesting all the disruption and conflict in this world. And they do it because they have a lot of money and means to be able to pull all this off. So yeah, let's go to the root of the problem and the people that are pulling the strings from up there with all the money and power. Let's go to them and hold them to account for what happens down in the streets of Minneapolis and everywhere else in the world.
Yeah, Minnesota is not the state with the highest number of illegals. Do you know which one is? I mean, would it be Texas?
Yeah, I would imagine it would be Texas. California's got a lot of them too. Florida quite a bit too. Those states, I think, have more, definitely.
Donald Trump. I know you're a massive fan of. I mean, you're not a massive fan of Donald. Does he need to change his strategy because he has removed or deported 200,000 illegals? That's a massive number, isn't it? I mean, and he's still going. They were let in by the previous administration.
Right.
So if Donald did change his tact, became a little more touchy-feely, but not so violent, how would he change? What should he do? I don't know if you could do this any less gruesome than it is at the moment. Maybe not have many people dying, but 200,000. That really says a lot about the number of illegals. I mean,
Well, they say though that anywhere from 20 million to 40 million came in during that 4-year period under the leftist Biden regime. That's a lot more than 200,000. And there were promises made that there would be a lot more that would be deported. You know, my view is that Trump is following orders. He's a disruptor. He's a destroyer. He's the bull in the china shop that just shakes everything up, and so he's doing a very good job of that, polarizing both sides, the left versus right. I mean, I agree that there was big money that on the leftist Marxist side that put the immigrants in America, the quote invaders into America. It's all been very well organized, and Trump, by being the other side to try and remove those that are foreign, especially criminals, foreign criminals that have invaded America. Of course, I think all Americans would agree there's a problem and that we need to deport those that do not belong because they've illegally entered. Just enforcement of the laws that are existing. Yeah, but you have to realize that Biden was there. He didn't win the election. Trump won in 2020. So, it's all planned and pre-planned. We go back and forth, left versus right, Democrat, Republican. They stayed in power that way. That's their MO, the divide and rule. So that's what we're all seeing played out here in this drama.
If you were president, that would be an interesting administration, I have to tell you. But if you were president, and you had to fix this problem up, and you mentioned 20 to 40 million, would you probably go and have a couple of large glasses of scotch? Because it's a very daunting number. 200,000 is a large number, but 20 to 40 million, do you think they'll ever get anywhere near that number?
No, I don't think so.
What would you do though? How would you do it differently?
Well, you have to get both sides working together. And I know that's counter to the programming of the divide and rule. They're not supposed to get together. They're supposed to clash and have the whole, emergency, powers. That's what Trump's going for, total emergency, fascist control over the streets of America, But yeah, you have, at least, with the death, this latest death, it's now bringing these people together. Supposed meetings have happened between, the head of ICE and this mayor and governor now of Minnesota. So that's what is needed. It has to be an integrated approach, but that goes counter to the agenda by the ones that are pulling all this off.
It's very interesting, and it's very disturbing. I had a couple of military people on yesterday, one in particular, both in Hawaii, of course, and they were spreading their aloha spirit all over the place, but they were very upset at what's happening in the mainland. I mean, Hawaii is sort of like, oh, well, we'll get around to it, bruh. We'll do it tomorrow. and they never do. But mainland, it's on steroids, and it is very disturbing. Not a good look for the rest of the world. And you have President Peace, aka Donald Trump, trying to bring peace around the world and within his borders. And I'm not saying it's entirely his fault. I'm probably saying it's probably little to do with him at the moment, and more with the funding by various leftist organisations and other countries such as China and the others who want to create some upheaval. It's not going to do a whole lot of damage except, probably destroy the communities within the US. But I do think it's a very, very, it's very unsavoury, and it doesn't make the US look a good place to live and to be walking around trying to bring peace in countries where within its own borders it just can't do it.
Well, I mean, it sets a bad example of all this conflict in America and the whole. I disagree with you though on the point that Trump's trying to bring peace in the world. He's doing just the opposite. And all you need to do is look at this whole buildup of almost war in Iran, and it is coming. It's a definite. But they're preparing for that. They know that Iran has rebuilt their air defense system, and they have many more missiles. They only used about less than 1% of their arsenal in that 12-day war in June. So, yeah, there's more fireworks all over the world that's going to be coming because that's also Trump's job. He's to stir up trouble both in America, where there's civil war, and make world war around the world in many different hotspots. Oh, he was going to fix the problem in Ukraine in 24 hours. Look what that is. We're still waiting on the quote talks. It goes back and forth, on and on and on we go. There's more hotspots. Look what he did earlier in the month in Venezuela. He's not a guy that's about to make peace with the world. He's making war against this whole world. So that's how I see it.
It's a scary place we live in. Actually, it's terrifying at the moment. And that's why you're on vacation or holidays, as we would say in England.
Yeah, you got to get away from it all.
Yeah, I mean, nice that I said that you go from paradise to paradise. Half your luck. Not that we're jealous, but we are. I did get a message from your water buffalo handler. Said it's missing you very much. You got to pick a name, Rex. What sex is it, by the way, male or female?
Male.
Rex the water buffalo, all right?
Okay, that's a good name.
If somebody wants to find out more about you, Joachim, just to follow what your readings or your thoughts, how do they do that?
Well, all my articles are posted on thegovernmentrag.com, jameshfetcher.org, and then I have 5 books out: Pedophilia and Empire, Satan, Sodomy, and the Deep State. It's a series that exposes the pedophilia plague on this earth, used by the same guys that we're talking about here that's doing the immigration problem, wars, all that. They're the same ones. So if you want to get a deeper glimpse into that, that's on Amazon, but it's also pedoempire.org. You can find every chapter of the 5 books and read it for free.
Great chatting, great conversation. Enjoy your noodles and a couple of beers. Joachim Hagopian, thank you very much for your time. This is The World Today.
Thank you, Mike.
Growing up, my father enjoyed a drink. It was just part of our culture. So you might have started drinking at 15 or 16, and so then it's just a slippery slope. As it affected me in the end, it was to the point where I couldn't even have money in my bank account because, I'd go to the pub or I'd go to the bottle-o. I started roofing in Sydney when I was about 20 years old. I had a crane come down on us. I jumped off the roof and the crane laid exactly down the line I was running. I could have ended up in a disability or life-threatening situation, and through that I developed PTSD. I medicated pretty heavily. I had a pretty pessimistic outlook on life. The glass was always half empty or whatever it was. You don't realise those things are impacting you so much. It's really hard to walk through the world. Depression and those negative feelings lead to thoughts that, you'd be better off not here. Suicidal thoughts are a terrible thing, You look at what you've given your family, you look at what you've taken away from your family. Dealing with that for extended periods of time and not talking to people about it is something that's probably taken a toll on me and my family that I didn't realise. My drinking got to a point where I was drinking in the mornings and, I had a job and my boss told me, it wasn't good enough, and I was so lucky that, my boss took me to an AA meeting that night. When you walk into AA, it says on the wall, admit that you can't do this yourself anymore. The second thing is admit that you need God in your life. Having that written there and it just saying, try and turn to the Lord, I thought, well, rightio, now that's my chance. I met Robbie pretty early on. I sort of reached out to him and said, where do I go? And Robbie had been coming to the Salvation Army Church and he said, look, come with me. And we spent a lot of Sundays together. That was pivotal in what I'm doing now. I believe that I was brought here for a reason. I came into the church and I was lucky. There's just so many lovely people here. It's the community as well as the church. One of the members prayed for me. And I think it was in nearly that time that my PTSD was healed and I felt like I belonged in a way. Walking close to the Lord has helped me use my heart more through worshipping the Lord on my own and connecting and drawing him close enough so that he could literally heal me. But when I start to fathom how much healing, glory, there's enough for everyone because that's how it's written, it's never ending. One day after church, I was at home, had an opportunity to see the kids, and my littlest boy was there and he was 8. And he looked at me in a way that he'd never looked at me before in his whole life. That's because I was sort of talking to him differently. I was really lucky to have that moment and to see what could happen if I just keep doing the right things and keep walking with the light. That was something that was pretty amazing. I'm going through a bit of a hard season now, with work and things. I think all I can do is move forward positively. But I really look forward to a future where I can see my kids and my boys grow up. So I really look forward to these next years to live a calm, peaceful life.
What is Australia's deadliest predator? The one that hits with more than 30 Gs of force. Strikes in under a second. Leaves catastrophic injury in its wake. You won't hear it, you won't see it, not until it's too late. Australia's deadliest predator isn't found in the wild. It's on our roads. Speeding is the killer.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. Some people asking about the background, why I'm doing it from a pedestrian crossing. That's Abbey Road. Shame on you. Hedley would know all about that. I talked to Hedley Rees, Managing Director and Lead Consultant at Pharmafo Limited, very shortly. We're going to talk to Hedley about what's happening in the regulation of drugs in places such as the UK and Australia. We'll also chat to Hedley about the US exit from WHO. Fantastic news. And if others will follow and how it will affect the organisation. Hedley, thanks for joining us. Tell me about the, and you're looking you've shrunk. Anyway.
Yeah, I've had technical problems this morning. I don't know what I look like. I look okay to me, I think, but I'm on my phone and I'm a digital Dumbo. given my age. So I apologize if I've got two heads or anything.
No, you just
Um,
look little. You're being dwarfed by me. I look like some big boomba. What's your views of the US pulling out of WHO?
oh, absolutely fantastic. Yeah. I've just pulled out on my evidence file for SARS-CoV-2 injections, which is a giant file. Guidelines for this is the WHO document issued in 2007. Guidelines for assuring the quality and non-technical safety evaluation of DNA vaccines. Now, this was 2007. It's an 81-page document, and the supply chain requirements, the requirements to be able to make these safely, are enormous. And the WHO was self-elected, non-government organization, NGO. We know what they've been up to, and it's duplicated all the regulations that are the formal regulations that had been set up by both the formal competent authorities in every government around the world, such as FDA, TGA, in fact, European Medicines Agency, MHRA. They are formal competent authorities that have delegated powers to control drugs. And yet, the WHO, the way they frame this is that the industry's got to follow their requirements, whereas actually their requirements are just a duplication, which has been in place since at least 1990, and before that even. So, to get out of the WHO is an absolute important thing. But the problem is that the WHO set up they were duplicating their regulations, but they also set up a duplicate authority that had membership of every regulatory authority across the world. And it was called the International Coalition for Medical Regulatory Authorities. No legitimacy whatsoever. But because they all joined up, then we knew that the first chair of that organization was Dr. Ian Hudson, who was also the CEO of the MHRA. This is in 2016. So we've got the head of the the MHRA in the UK, also chair of this duplicate body that had no legitimacy whatsoever. All the FDA was joined up, TJ was joined up, MHRA was joined up, everyone was joined up to this, almost every country in the world. And they sort of took on a life of their own with Ian Hudson as chair. He was also a bigwig in the European Medicines Agency in terms of he was on a deputy chair of a committee responsible for approving drugs across Europe. Then in 2019, Hudson joined the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as head of integrated drug development. And of course, COVID started the following year in 2020, and then we had injections in 2021. So really, the WHO has masterminded this whole injections scam. And the reason I knew it, because I looked at the supply chain requirements that they were publishing in 2007, and they could never have done that in 10 years, let alone 9 months. So, and I'd like to see other countries leaving as well as soon as possible. What you'd call the Eastern Bloc countries in the West, Hungary and that, I think they must be very concerned about the WHO. So there's a strong case for countries to leave the WHO, and I think now the US has done it. That's going to knock a big hole in their funding. But this organization now that's been set up by MHRA, who are the chairs this year. Swiss Medic was the chair last year in 2025, and that is the Swiss regulatory authority. But all this harmonization has been done by the International Council for Harmonization, an organization that has globally harmonized all the regulations since the early 1990s. So the WHO is not relevant. We don't need the WHO. We just need what we had 30, 40 years ago, which is ICH, the International Council for Harmonization, and we need the country regulatory authorities, and the FDA is really beginning to punch its weight with Robert Kennedy Jr. behind it. And I just hope Donald Trump does not bow to any pressure to destabilize Robert Kennedy Jr., because there's a lot of lobbying against him, a lot of people who'd like to see him go, especially people who've been fired from the FDA and the HHS. So it was a good, it was a good move to fire a lot of those people, but of course, when you do that, you initially create enemies. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, Mike.
No, it all makes sense, Hedley. You are very succinct. Interesting too. I saw a video yesterday. We're going to discuss it tomorrow with other guests, but it shows you that the and it was done in I think South Korea with regards to the mRNA vaccines and how they are responsible for such a huge number of cancers in people. And they say a lot of the cancers are around the point where you receive the inverted commas vaccine. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. The thing is, I've said this before, Mike. These injections are rebranding of the CD9, I think the CD9 directed CAR T therapies. Now, they started development in 1960 and they weren't going anywhere. But in 2014, the FDA, under the previous administrations, gave fast track designation to these therapies. Now, fast track basically meant that within 3 years, Novartis launched the first of these therapies, a CAR T therapy called Kymriah. And if you look at the side effect profile of it, the side effects are cytokine release syndrome, sepsis, also called cytokine storm, neurological toxicities, and secondary cancers. And the FDA has put a black box warning on those. This is in about 2021. They put a black box warning on there, and they subsequently added secondary cancers. So if you accept that these injections are a rebranding of the CAR T therapies, which I believe they are, then those side effects would be very well expected to have taken place. Now, I don't know the mechanism by which these secondary cancers are occurring, but we've got people like Professor Dalgleish, who is an oncologist, who is very outspoken about seeing cases, and personally, and where I live and our family and the people we know, there are a lot of people, I say a lot, there are people who are dying of pancreatic cancers, the very aggressive cancers, in 2 months. My wife works at the local hospital and, she hears these things and people aren't even asking questions at the moment. So, but you have to know that these injections have been in development. I was involved with them in the CAR T therapies. I was involved with them in 2013. So they've been in development at least for what's 13 years, before that even. So if you don't know that they're rebranding, then and you think they were developed in 9 months, then you haven't got any hope of working out what's gone on here.
Yeah, I was just looking at the online. It's from the Independent Medical Alliance. It's Dr. Paul Marrick, and he discusses recent COVID vaccine cancer review published in OncoTarget and the backlash and what they did. They tried to discredit the two researchers, did everything they could. In fact, they targeted the second researcher at the end, and Pfizer offered the researcher, not sure if it's a guy or a gal, offered the researcher a job at Pfizer, try to buy him out. It's very, very interesting, and if you can, Dr. Paul Marrick, but by the way, if you just go to the Independent Medical Alliance, which is formerly the FLCCC Alliance, I think with Pierre Corey. So it's an interesting video. It only goes for about 5 minutes, and we'll play it tomorrow and talk about it with some of our other guests. But they're very scary things, these, and as you mentioned, they're just sort of repurposed or bought out of the, brush off the cobwebs, and off we go. Where does the UK stand on this sort of what's the word? The research and reviews and stuff? Are they supportive generally, or especially when it comes to COVID, or are they a bit still like what they were before, years and years ago, that you have to go through particular hoops and hurdles to get to be able to present your review?
Yeah, well, they're still exactly the same. I've stopped for the time being, but I've just been through a phase where I wrote to the chairman of the MHRA, the current chairman, Dr. Harnden, or Professor Harnden or something, because they should have recalled the AstraZeneca injections, not just allowed AstraZeneca to stop selling them, but AstraZeneca is also solely and wholly responsible for all the stuff they made, all the component parts, the vials, the stoppers, the lipid nanoparticles all over the world. I said clearly, the AstraZeneca injection sold in 170 countries, Australia being one, and you can't just make them sell them and then say, "Oh, we'll stop selling them now." But the whole distribution supply chain is still in train, and who cleared that up? No one knows. No one knows if some of this stuff is in places it shouldn't be. It's still doing harm. And the MHRA, I won't go into detail, have a department that's responsible for investigating drugs when there's any sort of slight idea that these drugs are causing problems. Any drug is causing problems, and who wouldn't have concluded that with these injections? Then they have a department that has to investigate, and they have to go to all the doctors, the pharmacies, right up the supply chain back to raw materials to find out what went on. MHRA, and in the end, they refused to basically, they stonewalled. They just kept stonewalling, and there's lawyers behind it, because I've been using Perplexity AI to be able to frame these letters so that they've got a legal standing. And their lawyers seem to be able to beat what I'm sending, and it's a stonewall now. They said we only deal with the UK, so we're not responsible for those 169 markets where AstraZeneca sold these products. So someone else is going to have to sort that out. But the TGA should be investigating all the products that were sent to Australia that people took, and whatever is existing in. Could be in warehouses or car parks. We know all this happened in. It wasn't so much so with the AstraZeneca injections, but MHRA are still exactly the same as they were. No change. And now they're the chair of this access group, and I don't know what they're going to be doing. I honestly don't, because everything in the industry is in place to make sure drugs are safe if they follow the existing regulations. That FDA is the only one, I think, now has got back on track.
Read somewhere in the UK they're talking about building a trusted network. Can you tell me, is this just bureaucratic hot air, or are they legit? And I don't think it'll ever work, but what's your views?
Well, if this was the aviation sector, and the civil aviation authorities, or the equivalent in Australia or America, whatever, said, well, we're going to get together and we're going to help get planes to market quicker. we're just going to do it because there's not enough innovation with the planes that Boeing and all these guys have. They got no control over it, but they're going to help them do it. Now, what do you think about the Civil Aviation Authority? I'm not saying they are doing this, but if they are saying we're going to help these drugs get to these planes get to market quicker, cheaper, or whatever, because they've got no control over that. They're not making planes. Their job is to make sure the planes are airworthy, safe, and all the safety things that you have. So you'd immediately think there's something gone wrong here. If the aircraft companies themselves can't get planes to market any quicker, and I think they do follow all the right standards. If the regulators are saying we want to get it to market, you have to, quicker. You have to ask questions, and that's what they've done. They've taken on a role where we've called it enablement. And we had the June rain is there to enable vaccines to pharmaceutical products to get to market, and even that is a gobsmacking comment. But it is now that these regulators, as I say, not the FDA, are enabling and doing things to help drugs get to market quicker without making sure the safeguards in the supply chain is crucial. The supply chain is the rate determining step in developing a drug. 3 years to to build a non-clinical supply chain and make sure it's safe, and 7 years to build a clinical supply chain and make sure it's safe and effective, hopefully. But that was all distilled down to 9 months because they ignored the supply chain. They just said that we run some clinical trials from. The first one was made in YF Biopharma in Andover, which had a horrible inspection in 2021. I've got a copy of it through a Freedom of Information request. That first process 2 drug BNT2B2 should never have been sold, should never have left that plant. And if any lawyer wants the evidence, I've got it here in my desk.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's just going around in circles at the moment. But, a bit of hot air, a couple of glasses of wine, catching up with other scientists and government ministers and achieving absolutely zero. Would that be about right?
Yeah, that's absolutely bang on. And, there's no sign that anything is going to change at the moment. But I'm having a lot more traction now as a business with PharmaFlow and with my book and I'm back on LinkedIn after being in the wilderness for quite a while, and there are a lot of people on there now being outspoken. People outside the industry, directors, executives, people who work in automotives, who work in aerospace, and these industries, when they know what the supply chain is and they know how important it is, they're beginning to speak up. So if you're on LinkedIn, if you're not on LinkedIn or you want to get on LinkedIn or whatever, my friend calls it Facebook for business. But the power of LinkedIn is that you can actually connect with people who you want to connect with, people who you think you've got something in common with. You don't have to post all these stuff that they post. And I just think social media and Facebook again is very open. There's stuff on Facebook now that would never have happened 3-4 years ago.
What does your friend call it?
Paul Morris, he's a Welshman, and he won't join. He won't join LinkedIn. But yeah,
look, if somebody wants to find out more about you besides LinkedIn, how do they do that?
Well, I've got a Substack called Inside Pharma. It's free, and everything is on there. The inspection at YF Biopharma, the first Pfizer drug that was launched. It's a research and development facility. It's not a manufacturing facility. So they can Inside Pharma, headleyreese.substack.com. I write books. If you go on Amazon and look at my various books, you can see those. COVID Supply Chain Facts, Not Fiction is a favorite of mine because I wrote that in 2023 in anticipation of people asking questions like, how should drugs be developed then? And so yeah, so that's how to get in touch.
Good on you. Plenty of choices there. Hedley Rees from Pharmaphobe, MD, thank you so much for your time. We'll do this again very shortly. This is The World Today, and coming up next, we'll have the protagonist.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. The White House said President Donald Trump will not back down from demands for strict immigration enforcement in Minnesota following unrest in Minneapolis. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump has urged Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and other leaders to fully cooperate with federal authorities by transferring criminal illegal immigrants to federal custody and assisting immigration and customs enforcement in arrests and detentions. The administration argues cooperation is necessary to restore public safety after 2 fatal shootings involving federal agents and ongoing protests tied to Operation Metro Surge. Minnesota officials have pushed back, calling for independent investigations and reduced federal presence, while Trump has sent border czar Tom Homan to oversee operations and coordinate fraud probes. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will support diplomatic security arrangements linked to the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics, Italian and U.S. officials confirmed. Organizers said ICE agents would be present to protect high-ranking U.S. officials and would not conduct immigration enforcement, with all security remaining under Italian authority. ICE said its Homeland Security Investigations Unit will assist in vetting and mitigating risks from transnational crime. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will attend the opening ceremony. The involvement has drawn political backlash in Italy, with centrist parties criticizing ICE's presence following recent scrutiny of the agency after fatal incidents during U.S. immigration operations. Sweden's government announced plans to lower the age of criminal responsibility to 13 for the most serious crimes, aiming to curb gangs' growing use of children in violent crime. Under proposals from the governing coalition, the change would apply to offenses such as murder and attempted murder and be phased in over 5 years. The plan would also remove reduced sentencing for offenders aged 18 to 20 and raise the maximum prison term for minors. Officials said criminal networks increasingly recruit teenagers, sometimes deploying them across borders. While critics warn of criminalizing children, Justice Minister Gunnar Stromer said the measures reflect an urgent public safety crisis. French lawmakers have approved a bill banning social media use for children under 15 and prohibiting mobile phones in high schools, with the measure expected to take effect in September. The legislation passed the National Assembly by a wide margin and now heads to the Senate after President Emmanuel Macron requested fast-tracking. Macron said the ban is supported by scientific recommendations and public opinion, citing concerns over children's mental health and exposure to harmful content. The law aligns with the EU's Digital Services Act and excludes educational and open-source platforms. The vote follows similar debates in other countries, including the UK and Australia, as Europe considers stricter online protections for minors. Former UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman said the Conservative Party is effectively finished, arguing it's impossible to defend its record or believe in its future policies. Speaking after defecting to Nigel Farage's Reform UK, Braverman said her break with the Conservatives had been years in the making, dating back to Brexit. She accused party colleagues of abusing and marginalizing her for pushing policies such as cutting immigration, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, and confronting Islamist extremism. Braverman said she was ignored and later sacked for raising concerns about policing and anti-Semitism, claiming the party has been overtaken by centrists and no longer represents conservative principles. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke about his scathing indictment of Gavin Newsom in Davos.
I used to be a teacher, and there's always one poor kid in the class who can't keep up and gets very frustrated. We know Kamala Harris couldn't keep up, so she would start laughing. Tim Walz would start shaking. Gavin Newsom lashes out. And I believe Gavin Newsom had to go all the way to Switzerland to see all the CEOs that he chased out of California.
We'll be back with another news break at the top of the next hour. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Father wears his Sunday best. Mother's tired, she needs a rest. The kids are playing up downstairs. Sister's sighing in her sleep. Brother's got a date to keep, he can't hang around.
And then for the defense.
Our house it has a crowd. There's always something happening, and it's usually quite loud.
How long do you think we're gonna stay here for?
Our house in the middle of our street. Our house in the middle of our...
There is a problem with medicine, and we can explain what it is by looking back to the discovery of penicillin. Penicillin, it turns out, was not just an accidental finding. Alexander Fleming discovered that mold he found in a culture dish was killing bacteria, but it took over 10 years before a team at Oxford University were able to isolate the active ingredient. They produced small quantities for preclinical and clinical trials, helping prove the compound was safe and could beat infection. However, they couldn't produce it at scale. In 1941, Andrew Jackson Moyer of the US Department of Agriculture, the forerunner to the FDA, suggested changes to the manufacturing process, enabling mass production. It turns out medicines are not invented when someone discovers a new molecular entity. They are the product of key stakeholders working together collaboratively. Until medicine can be manufactured at scale, it may as well not exist. And in 2025, this is a problem. In the 1980s, pharmaceutical companies began outsourcing production. Suddenly the system was significantly less integrated. Someone with a new discovery today will find themselves disconnected from the rest of the development and manufacturing process. Companies that develop medicine are still happy to work with big established pharma companies, but the modern day Flemings are cut out of the system. The result is far fewer new medicines coming to market. We want to fix this by ensuring the pharma industry builds a more integrated supply chain. We also believe that doctors' expertise administering medicine should be included at the beginning of the process. We know that doctors on the front line have insights about how to repurpose medicine. Doctors should be able to report their findings so that the necessary testing can be completed and they can share their results worldwide. Learn more here and help us take medicines back to the future.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And welcome to The World Today and the Protagonists, hour number 2. Thank you so much for your time. Looking at the ISIS fiasco at the moment, just looking at some of the reports that are coming in, facilitating the secret return of ISIS brides who left the UK to join a terrorist cult, the filling of defence barracks with illegal immigrants in a small town where single young men are free to come and go at will. and the astronomical cost of housing asylum seekers that have become a permanent and very costly part of the UK budget. The flood of illegals in the UK, while somewhat less in scale to that experienced in America, looks and feels like it is wholly sanctioned by the government. Again, one has to ask, how do these representatives sit by and watch public finances and social cohesion deteriorate, creating grounds for dangerous and public insurrection? While some of the media are covering the public unrest and trying to hold incompetent ministers to account, these pressures are clearly insufficient to bring the madness to an end. UK borders are still open. Few, if anyone, are being deported or locked up or assessed for genuine claims for asylum, and the public is forced simply to lump it. It's hard to understand how opposition parliamentarians are allowing the government to get away with it, but we saw it happen under COVID. The Tories cannot sit back smugly. They haven't got anyone anyway who's a Tory now, just about, as it was under their government that the rot commenced. Can Nigel Farage do enough from his position? Politics would dictate that he is sitting pretty, but is he? Should the outrage be even greater? Our panel today, at the start, we're waiting for Alan Cook, who's just about there now. In fact, I'll just push this and see if we can bring him in. There he is. No, he's not in yet. What about that one there? No, and we're just going all over the place at the moment. Robin Tilbrook, just zigzagging around. Cam, where are you? Robin Tilbrook is a solicitor, leader and chairman of the English Democrats and chairman of the Workers of England Union. Our next guest, who's just going to pop in a second, is Alan Cook, politics and technology consultant. And our third guest from yesterday, in fact, and he was just absolutely brilliant, is Major Fred Galvin, author of A Few Bad Men, the true story of US Marines ambushed in Afghanistan and betrayed in America. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. We still haven't got this working at the moment. I don't know what Cam is doing, but anyway, there we are, all working now. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. What's your views, Robin, on the continuing saga of the asylum renters and the idea that government doesn't really care much about taking over small country towns?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is what is happening across England, and we've got big demonstrations occurring in a small market town in Sussex, Crowborough, where the cadet camp has now been taken over for housing illegal immigrants, and consequently, the people are, and they are all young men. The local people are extremely worried that they are going to be preyed upon by these people who are completely unvetted, and we don't know to what extent the people that are being housed there are actually serial criminals, let alone ISIS supporters. They might well be, and it is very worrying for local people. There've been a whole string of crimes committed by people in these type of camps or asylum hotels and so on across the country, and people are now being faced with this policy right across the country. Lots of towns like Crowborough hadn't really experienced what was going on, but now they're faced with it, and of course they can see that it is actually a threat to not only the country.
Alan, your thoughts? How can Nigel fix this problem up?
Well, the difference between our party and the other parties is we actually have the political will to attack this, and the others don't. You know, it's one of the reasons I left the Tory party. I was only with them for about a year, but I was in the Commons having a coffee with Sir David Davis and Sir Bill Wiggin, talking about immigration. At the time, they were both working on immigration bills, and they agreed with me that actually under international law, we can do the same as we're doing now, pick them up in the Channel, but instead of taking them to Dover, we take them back to Calais. And they said, yeah, we agree. However, there's not the political will in the Tory party to do that. And they added it would look bad internationally. And I really don't care how bad it looks internationally. The second their feet hit English UK soil, we've lost the game. Because it is a game to them. They're playing the system. It's obvious. We all know it's happening. We can see it in front of our eyes, but there's not the political will to do anything about it. And ours is the only party that will do something about it. And what they should be happening now is they should be detained and deported. And by detained, I mean they should be locked up. They should not be free to roam. You know, I said this on air before, that they are putting our children, our wives, anyone vulnerable in the community at risk by dumping this many unvetted fighting age men onto little villages. I think there should be some recourse to the people that are doing this. I think the first crime that happens in Crowborough by one of these people, the Home Secretary should be prosecuted at the same time. You know, if God forbid, if someone gets sexually assaulted or attacked, I think the Home Secretary should actually be up for charges. You know, this is not different to negligence through corporate manslaughter. You know, they really should be some comeback to the people that are inflicting this on our citizens.
And Fred, from the US, I mean, we saw what happened when we had an influx of, some are saying, 40 million illegal immigrants on those caravans that were coming from South America. The UK hasn't got that headache at the moment because they all can't swim, but they do have boats. And, you know, so the problem is still there, smaller in numbers, but still there. What do you think the UK government should be doing?
They should not look at what happened and endorse what the United States did over the last four years in the previous administration. And Britain has a proud, long history and tradition, and they know what to do. They've had to face what Sir Winston Churchill had to do and stand up for their rights. But once you allow this information warfare and people trying to accuse people of xenophobia and this is the right thing to do, well, how many of those people, the Tories or whoever else is saying that, have any skin in the game? How many of them have these people in their homes? And I mean in every single room in their home with their husband and wife, with their kids. So put some skin in the game, but that likely will not happen. So it does need to be stopped. We have laws, and a crude comparison is you lock your doors, you lock your fence, and you protect what you have. This must also be done at a national level, or you will have no sovereignty. And what we've seen here in the United States is, yes, we're a nation of immigrants, but you have to vet those immigrants, and it's very hard to do on a large scale. And just a few of them can come in and cause massive problems. And when you don't know if somebody's a part of a transnational criminal organization bringing drugs, or they have a violent background, and that's what we're seeing across the United States, where we're seeing all these violent crimes in mass transit systems, murders. We're seeing rapes of our women, and just massive scale property crimes. This is what could likely come, and I'm not trying to be doomsday, but when we did not enforce our borders, that is what happened right after the 2020 election.
Fred, while you're here, what they've done is they've moved a whole bunch, and more will come. Young men, young immigrants, people that have come from other countries, and they're young blokes, to a place called Crowborough. I think that's pronounced right from an Aussie's point of view. It's about right. There's security concerns, though, because there is no security at the actual military base that they're staying at, and it's now no longer a military base and will be used to house immigrants. Just want to quickly, Robin, how many people live in this small village?
I'm not sure exactly. It is a small town, I think, Crowborough, and I would say it's probably maybe 4 or 5 thousand people live
Okay,
there,
and
and
so
the aim, I think, that the Home Office has is to have something like 800 um, illegal immigrants. I mean, they are people who've arrived illegally, with often having destroyed their papers and removed all possible ways of identifying them. Um, and they then claim asylum as soon as they get ashore. Clearly, it would be much better if they were never allowed ashore in the first place. But as they are on shore, the problem is not only the lack of political will, which is certainly the case, that the governing parties, both Conservative and now Labour, are not have no actual will to sort this out. Otherwise, they would have been able to do so. There's no real legal impediment that would prevent them. It's just that they don't want to do anything about it, and they are enabling it. I think the other problem, which from what Adam was mentioning about prosecutions, that he would have to bear in mind that the case would come up before a district judge who's been appointed under the Blairite Judicial Appointments Commission, and can only be appointed on the basis that he's got a lifetime's commitment to equality and diversity. So in other words, he's going to be a full-on sort of regime activist, and would be on the side of the mass immigration and enabling this to happen. So it would be difficult to find a judge, or you'd be very lucky to find a judge who was going to be on the side of clamping down on this.
So 800 men, women, or just all young blokes?
Young men only, from what we're told.
Okay, so Fred, from a security point of view, you've got a town or a village of 5,000. You've got 800 in this army barracks coming and going as they would like. Papers destroyed. Documentation is very, very scarce. What sort of problems do you think, one, the locals can expect, and what would have happened in the US under Trump, for example? Under Biden would have been come and go. 40 million, you can live anywhere you want to live and we'll help you out. Under Trump, it's an entirely different thing. If you have 800 undocumented or papers burnt and stuff like that, you're going to have problems, aren't you, for a town of only, or a village of only 5,000?
Yes, I see several factors in doing something like this. One is the economic, just financial cost. Who's bearing that burden? Well, those who are paying taxes. And then when you talk about a small town, putting them in military or former military barracks, that creates a lot of unrest, demoralizes the community. And this is what I fought for nearly 20 years in a war, in 27 years of service, is we go after networks that do these types of things. This is not something that's uncoordinated, that's just organic, and all these guys decided to flee from what? What specifically? They're playing the system, but when you look at how long you have to endure with these costs, you look at how it's demoralizing those that have served in this location, the people in the town, and do the citizens, and is the government going to do anything? And apparently it seems they're very fickle to take any type of strong action, just like in our past administration. But we have a leader now in the United States that's facing a lot of blowback in our international and national press, but it's not, he's not going to capitulate, we just have too many. And you see he's trying to go after some of these that people are resisting up there in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they're like, hey, this is who we're going after right now, and he's a pedophile. But a lot of these citizens just want, because their hatred is so strong for Donald Trump, is that's what is in their mind. This has become a psychological operation, and hopefully it does not get to that stage in the United Kingdom where people are just endorsing this. Yes, we have to bring these people in. You need to stand up and have some clever lawyers get this on the right side of the law. And like I had said many times here in the United States for years and years, we have an obligation for those who fail or elected officials to vote those incumbents out. I don't care if they did something good. You're accountable. So when the intersection is right here, you're allowing these people that do not have the best interest of the British citizens in their mind. Well, you need to get rid of those elected officials that are allowing this to happen. And same thing with the judges. I don't know how that necessarily works in the United Kingdom, if some of them are elected or not, but vote them all out is what my uncle used to say, is get rid of every single one. Unless they perform and do the will of the people, they need to be gone. Hit the trap door on them.
I totally agree. Alan, the locals are genuinely afraid of what's happening to their village. It's sort of a thread from the government, though. They really don't give we would say, a rat's about what their citizens care about or want. They have another agenda. So two things. What's your thoughts on the security threat? And if they don't give a rat's, as we would say in Australia, about their citizens, what do they give a rat's about?
Well, it seems to be their ideology more than anything else, because to a straight thinking person, none of this actually makes sense, because it is self-harm for this nation. But you can see aspects of Marxism in there. You can see that the sovereignty of Parliament in the UK is actually being given away to unelected judges and international bodies, supranational bodies. And so we are basically removing our own power to do anything about this. It is a gross act of self-harm, but clearly part of a greater plan. There are political bodies around the world which I suspect are actually behind this, and that's where us as a party, Reform UK, are very different to what has gone and what we have now, because we are currently the only real UK-centric party. We're the only party that is actually going to put the UK citizen first. And obviously, this situation where we're dumping hundreds and in some cases thousands of undocumented fighting age men from a different culture who have a different view on women into our tranquil villages and towns, of course it's going to go horribly wrong. They know it is, but as you say, they don't seem to give a rat's and then the next word about it. But what we can do really is get rid of the current government, but we need a general election to do that. It's possible we're going to have this shambles, this sort of UK hating parliament in potentially for another 2 years, not just wasting money when they're actually also destroying the economy, but also putting the lives and hearts and minds of our people at risk. I can't really see a worse situation than what they're doing at the moment, unless we actually hit World War III, unless we get a full-scale invasion. We've had 200,000 of these illegal immigrants come to this country over the last decade, and that is a fighting force potentially. If they actually unify, if they actually get someone to lead them, that is bigger than all of our armed forces put together. We're very much teetering on civil unrest at the moment.
What about and the other thing too, Alan, vigilantes? If you haven't got enough law and order, or it's not present, or you fell under threat, the obvious thing is the vigilante gangs, and which also can get out of hand. You can't have that happening, but I do understand why they would do it.
We can have that happening. It's happened In my borough, I'm actually the chairman of the London Borough of Bromley for Reform UK, and Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, actually put ULEZ, which is a tax system for cars, into outer London, which does not have air pollution issues, and it was sold on air pollution. But there's one area called Biggin Hill. Biggin Hill just said no. So every time one of these ULEZ cameras is put up, whatever it's put up on comes down overnight. So they have kept Biggin Hill ULEZ free for years now. So, the public, to a certain degree, when these things are actually forced upon them, are now saying no. And yeah, it's going to end up in rather an ugly situation. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but we don't want these people being dumped into our villages. They should be deported. At least we can set up offshore processing very quickly, and then nothing is in the pipeline. So we're going to have to put up with this until something really bad happens, and then we are approaching civil unrest now. It's going to happen in pockets. We've already had riots in certain areas of the country. So, it's an open book. This is happening. And the political class seem absolutely, not bothered about it. So, yeah, it's going to get worse and worse until something happens. And then hopefully people will actually look at it and stop this.
I just want to play you, actually, one more thing before we get into the next topic. Vigilante groups, Robin, in your opinion, I mean, in the US, if they're vigilantes, they have guns. In the UK, you have manners. Well, maybe not. But what could possibly go wrong? When I ever hear of a vigilante group, it makes me nervous because I think you have people with good intention at the onset. It's amazing how that good intention could sort of meander off that right track.
Yes. Alan's quite right. We are starting to have vigilantism in a sense, but they haven't got to the point where it's anything more than damage to property, and that's what he's talking about there with the attack on the ULEZ cameras, and I think that's more widespread than just Biggin Hill. And people are getting more and more fed up with the agenda that's being pushed upon us. But it is I think worth bearing in mind that the leadership of the Labour Party are Fabians, and the motto of or the original emblem of the Fabians was a wolf in sheep's clothing, because what the idea behind Fabianism is that they are actually communists, but they're, instead of wanting a violent revolution, they want to make it happen slowly and incrementally, and I think that's basically the agenda that's behind what's going on, because the leadership of the political system in Britain, they are people who actually want to destroy the nation state, and they are probably applying the leftist idea of accelerationism, which is that things have got to get worse before we have the revolution, so the move towards vigilantism is in a sense a sort of reaction to the attack that's occurring against our ways, our history, our political system, our culture, and people are getting fed up with it, and it's quite understandable that they are.
What do you think, Fred? Vigilante groups in the US have guns. In the UK, I said they have manners, but they're also very tough blokes and ladies, of course. What could possibly go wrong with a vigilante group, and what does that signify?
One thing, we have not had that happen on any type of large scale that I've heard of in the United States. But I would also, and I agree with what Robin and Alan had said, we have to understand that none of these other Arab nations or Muslim nations are wanting to accept any of these people. And it's not like they're fleeing from one that another would not accept whatever they're fleeing from, but they're not accepting them. So I think this is just like Fidel Castro did in sending everyone out of his prisons after he took over Cuba. This has happened to the United States on more than one occasion, not just with people in Cuba and Mexico and in Venezuela, but this is going on nonstop. I think the United States citizens have shown incredible restraint not to do anything when they are. They do publicize the rape, the despicable rape, and a horrific murder of Laken Riley and so many other young girls across America. Well, that's happening, and they have no intention to assimilate. Because one thing I also wanted to add is we have methods for legal immigration, and that is if you are an asylum seeker or you have some skilled job that you're applying for, whether it's a temporary visa or to be a permanent resident. And if we need to increase that, the United Kingdom and the United States can increase that because of the needs of our nations. But we have to understand that there is a bigger picture, that there is a larger Geppetto that's pulling the strings on this Pinocchio. And I believe this is a globalist picture that is meaning to stress and overwhelm, not just shock the systems of the United States and the United Kingdom, but to bring it down. And as Alan had just said, or Robin had just said, it's a long-term approach to infiltrate and overthrow our governments due to not assimilation, but to overpopulate. And 30, 40, 50 years from now, we will not remember what our nations currently look like. And that's a shame. And it requires action right now for our citizens to take back our governments and to make sure that those who are leading us can understand that they will be not just out of office, but the citizens see the unseen, that we will lose our culture. We will lose everything that we've had if our way of life and our government is disrupted by, these are invaders. Mm-hmm. And you look at the numbers that have happened in the United States, over 20 million. I mean, it was so much. It's just like this money that we've given to Ukraine. We can't keep track of it. I know Americans have bad memories, and especially when it comes to accounting. And this money goes everywhere, but we cannot allow that to happen globally to some of our strong allies, like in the United Kingdom.
Mm. I just want to play you this video. It goes for about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll come back. It is very scary on what government is not telling us. By the way, this is The Protagonists.
Good evening. Today, it's been claimed that the British state has been secretly sneaking ISIS brides back into Britain for years. 6 women linked to Islamic State, held alongside Shamima Begum, have been quietly brought back to the UK. That is according to the director of a camp that holds these jihadi brides. Now, before any bleeding heart liberals pipe up and say, oh, these poor women are victims, can I just remind you of the fact that Shamima Begum knew exactly what ISIS were doing when she travelled over there to join a genocidal Islamic death cult. Here she is, speaking to the media back in 2019.
Did you know what Islamic State were doing when you left for Syria? Because they had beheaded people, there were executions.
Yeah, I knew about those things, and I was okay with it.
Bingo. There you go. Women can be just as radical or even more radical than men. A report by the Henry Jackson Society in 2019 found Muslim girls were more active when it came to seeking out extremist material online. And let me introduce this monster. This is Sally Ann Jones, okay, known as the White Widow. She was born in Greenwich, married a jihadi, wanted to recruit an army of Islamist women. She was behind a plot to assassinate the late Queen and Prince Philip. She used social media to tell people how to make homemade bombs. In 2016, she issued specific calls for Muslim women to launch terrorist attacks in London, Glasgow and Cardiff during the month of Ramadan. It is dangerously naive to say that women cannot be as bad as the men when it comes to jihad. And we've reportedly let some of these ISIS brides back into Britain. Shocking. We've apparently allowed hundreds of actual ISIS fighters to come back to Britain as well. In fact, more than 400 of them. Here's Sadiq Khan being grilled about it shortly after the London Bridge terror attack.
How many of those 400 have come back to London?
The estimate is just over half. It's one of the reasons why it doesn't make sense for the government to be cutting resources from those...
Where are they? You're the mayor of this capital city. Where are they?
I can't follow 400 people. What I can do is make sure with the policies, because what we can do though is make sure with the resources for the police and the experts to follow.
Or you just couldn't let the jihadis in. You know, that is an option, isn't it? I mean, the fact that previous governments appear to have been sneaking ISIS brides back into Britain could be used by Shamima Begum's lawyers. Begum is taking her case to the ECHR. They're going to take one look at this and, mark my words, she'll be back in Britain before you can say Allahu Akbar. This is just like the Afghan resettlement scheme all over again. Around 40,000 Afghans were secretly brought to Britain at a cost of billions of pounds after successive governments tried to cover up the fact that there'd been a data breach that supposedly left them at the mercy of the Taliban. But they bungled it. They imported criminals and people who've been referred to the terrorism watch list. The Telegraph reported that, shock horror, some of these blokes might actually be linked to the Taliban. Who could have seen that coming? What are our leaders doing to us? And I need to remind you that you weren't allowed to know about the ISIS brides or the Afghans. I think they never wanted you to find out the truth. I think they are willing to put you and your family at risk to hide it from you. You have every right to be very angry about that.
Oh, there you are. Robin, what's your thoughts? I mean, that is disturbing. It's also happening in Australia. And it's as if we live in two different universes sometime. But that is quite alarming, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Patrick Christys is absolutely right. This is what's happening. There is obviously also a particularly alarming development just at the moment with the Islamist government forces of Syria overthrowing the Kurds in the eastern part and consequently approaching the camps where all the ISIS prisoners were being held. There are almost certainly very large numbers of them going to be released. And so there will be a surge in problems occurring across the Western world, and quite a lot of it will be happening, I suspect, here in England. I think it is also worth bearing in mind, in light of what Fred was saying about voting these people out, we've got problems with that at the moment because our Labour government, with the collusion of many conservative so-called politicians have been cancelling elections across England. This is now the second year in which quite a lot of elections have been cancelled. Who knows whether we will in fact get the general election in 2029, which is what we're looking forward to. They might be trying to say next thing that it should be not 5 years but 7 years between elections. They've got a majority in the House of Commons. They are engineering a majority in the House of Lords. They'll be able to get whatever through that they want to from a purely legal point of view, quite ignoring the moral point, of course.
Alan?
Well, going back to what Robin was saying earlier on about the Fabians, there's no big smoking gun, but they've left a very long trail, and we can actually see how we've got to this position. From the Blair Brown days, a socialist party did various bits of constitutional damage, which the next Tory party should have and would normally have actually corrected. But unfortunately, they were global socialists, so they actually went along with it. And in certain cases with immigration, actually doubled down and made it an awful lot worse. So now we're actually back to a proper full-blown socialist government again. These things are going to get worse and worse. But, the 2010 Equalities Act that was pushed through has actually expanded what was originally the Long March. And now, we've always known that these sort of lefty, no borders, no nation tendencies were in the universities and to a certain degree in the civil service. But now, thanks to ESG and DEI and other aspects of what has been added into our country, it's now in the private sector as well. So they've very nearly completed the march in pretty much taking over the country. And we've given judges far too much power now. And we're taking sovereignty. I mentioned earlier, things like the Supreme Court, Blair's little baby, that should have been disbanded because that has taken power out of the laws. We've given the Bank of England the ability to set interest rates. That should be something done by government. So we're emancipating our government, and it's no wonder we're being overrun. Letting her back into the country, the Home Secretary said no, but now that will be overturned by the legal system. And it won't even be our legal system, it will be the ECHR. So, we are giving away our sovereignty and our powers, and then we seem a little bit surprised when it's used against us. We are, obviously we're planning on overturning all of this. It's going to be a hell of a job, and it's less of a political battle now, and actually, because of the situation we find ourselves in, it's more of a legal battle. So a lot of what we do when we actually do get into power, and they can't cancel the general, in my mind. Their people will be out in the streets. If they try and do that, it wouldn't last long. Maybe another lockdown to stop people getting in the streets. But I think people are wise now to what they're up to. I can't actually see that happening again. It's what this country is facing is what America has started going through, which is the reversal of a lot of bad decisions over the last couple of decades. And so luckily they are trailblazing for us, certainly with getting rid of wokeness. So, where America is going on a positive nature, then we will actually follow them, I believe.
Fred, you've served just about everywhere, and you deep cover the whole lot. What can we expect from an ISIS bride? Because they were around many barbaric acts, and who knows, some probably committed those acts. What can we expect, for example, in, say, a community that an ISIS bride has come back? Is she a danger to society? What is she harbouring? Do you think that's a wise thing to bring back ISIS brides back to, say, the UK or those to Australia? And you've had first-hand experience with all sorts of action. I would probably think it's a little bit like Trevor Coates, and that's who's a military cross. He was not speaking very highly about this happening at the moment. What's your views?
Well, thank you. The Marine Special Operations organizations that I stood up in 2006, we had to go down, and those Marine Raiders went down to southern Philippines. And that's actually the longest war that America's fought. It's still ongoing. But there is a extremist Islamic culture down in the southern Philippines in Mindanao. And there was a battle in 2017 that the Marine Raiders had fought alongside the armed forces of the Philippines in a 60-day fight, killing over 900 Islamic extremists from both ISIS and Abu Sayyaf. So when you don't take care of this is a radical ideology. And I know in America, we take our freedom of speech, and I've seen a lot of people go out there and say things who served alongside me, and they're retired military senior officers. And some of them are Muslim, and some of them are saying, like, you can't, this is extremist. You can't say this about Muslim. And, we treat, I can say as an American, the problem is with Islam, and that's not an endangered species. We have to call it for what it is. That is an ideology, and that ideology, more than anything else in the world, is what's wanting to kill us. We are the primary target. We're the public enemy number one. When a lot of these people are coming in from South and Latin America and Central America, I'll rephrase it this way. The best you can expect is that these about 800 young men, the best thing is that they come in and they undermine the young lads that are trying to get work may be unskilled, maybe they're painters or they do some kind of labor, and now these guys will work for a fifth of the cost. And so I've seen that happen in my own hometown in mid-America, that everybody that used to have these jobs, now they're displaced. That's what's coming. But at worst, you'll have rapes, you'll have property crime, you'll have massive costs, and then you'll have this radical ideology. That is what took place down in southern Philippines. And once that gains a toehold, it's very difficult to ever root that out. And especially when you have members of parliament and the members of the media trying to amplify this information warfare that, oh, don't be a xenophobe. And well, how many of these people do you have as friends or in your house? How many of them are you so soft-hearted towards that you're helping out with work and anything else? It's just that kind of phoniness. It needs to be called out. But the best way to call it out is through the elections and vote them all out. People that believe in traditional cultures of the West need to make sure that they are organized, just like this globalist agenda is. They are organized and they have their voice heard at the polls, and they get every single one of these incumbents out. There has to be a accountability and a cost for allowing something like this to destroy our nations.
Robin, can I ask you, what would force the government to change their policies on immigration and asylum seekers, besides being voted out?
Well, the trouble is, although only about 20% of the electorate voted for Labour, the political system is so broken that they've nevertheless got a supermajority of MPs in the House of Commons. Our constitution gives a supermajority in the House of Commons almost total power. And it's made even worse by the fact that the other chamber, the House of Lords, they are basically ensuring that that they're going to get a supermajority of Labour peers in the House of Lords as well, because they're able to fix the appointment system. So we're not easily going to be able to change the course before the next general election.
Alan, what do you think would encourage the government to change their policies besides the thought of being booted out, which, I mean, they should go. I mean, and it depends on the numbers that turn up for the other parties, including Reform. But everybody is suggesting that Nigel will be the next PM with the election. But there's a few years to go before that. And it's amazing how governments do U-turns and change their mind. So what would encourage the government, besides the fear of losing the next election, to change their policies?
Well, Reform now are the largest party in the country by membership. We are ahead in the polls for well over the last 200 polls now. It is looking like it's ours to lose. But what will the government do? Nothing. They are not part of the solution. They are 100% part of the problem. It is ideology behind this, and they are not for changing. It's some people are even saying some of the damage they're doing is deliberate. They may be operating a scorched earth policy. So whoever actually gets into government next, whoever inherits this, it's such a mess that the voting public will not see any improvement from the next government, landing them the chance of getting back in again. There's no evidence for that apart from the fact that it does seem deliberate, the mess they're actually creating here. Nothing cannot be undone in British Parliament. You cannot tie the hands of the next government. So, however, Blair and Brown discovered that actually international law is a damn sight harder to reverse than bills going through Parliament. That is why, we are now being, most of the Labour Party, not most, but an awful lot of them, the front bench, are actually lawyers. They don't have practical business experience, which it might be why the economy is tanking. So we are led by lawyers, and it's these people are a big part of the problem. International law being one. We must give away the Chagos Islands to a country that's never owned them, because the UN says so. They kowtow to international bodies, international law, and they do not put the interest of this country first. They're not going to change. So, the bond market may tank, and they may force a general election. Outside of that, the party itself is not going to change. They think they're doing the right thing for the long term.
Just got somebody on chat. Mogden said that by the time reform may get in, the UK will be totally taken over. It's going to be a very big job to undo what the Labor Party have put in place. It's just going to be incredibly hard.
Yeah, but we're working on that now. We're writing the bills now that we need. Trump 2.0, first day, 100 executive orders signed off. We can't do that because we have to get these through Parliament and then through the House of Lords. But the bills that we need to actually get us back on our feet again are being written now. So we will hit the ground running. We're not, the Labour Party seem to be the only ones that actually didn't know they were going to win the last general election, and they're running around headless for the first year. They still seem to be doing that now. It's incompetence as well as, I think, the will to damage the country. So, we are working on what's needed to be done now. And as I said, there's a lot of legal things we need to change, as well as pushing bills through Parliament. So we'll be ready for the task when we get in.
Righto. Robin, what do you think?
Well, I like what Alan's saying, but I think we're a long way between the problems we got now and any solution. And I think we can't be sure that the electoral system will be left as it was, and we can't be sure what will be done about allowing people to vote in the general election. For instance, the vast number of legal immigrants that have been allowed in by the Conservatives and now Labour. The fact is, they may all wind up having a vote in the general election because the Labour Party may be able to change the laws. They would have the power to do so, and that may actually skew the outcome so that we don't wind up with anybody that wants to do anything about the ongoing mass immigration. We may wind up with a situation where we simply are not able to take control through any legal or constitutional means.
Fred, you just looking at, and we are winding up very shortly, by the way, looking at the US, it's an incredibly hard job to undo the damage the administration beforehand put in place, isn't it?
That is a true statement, and we just have so much in our media, as well as members of Congress, that are working against law and order. They disregard that you had the Clintons, you had the Obamas. They deported much more than President Trump is deporting right now, but they're obstructing justice. We have laws that say you can't do this. President Biden did it, and just trying to reverse. I mean, going after the worst. It's a big problem, but I believe, and hopefully I'm wrong, that this can happen. And once people get a toehold and feel that they can assert themselves, stand by. I think it's going to be much worse of a situation. And as we've seen in Minneapolis with these daycares, just people coming in from Eastern Africa there in the Horn of Africa and just exploiting our finances. Because, as my grandfather used to say, don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out. And that seems to be what's happened to a lot of our elected officials in the United States, that they just allow these loopholes for people to make millions and millions of dollars by ripping off Americans, and right in front of our eyes. The truth here is blatantly hidden right in front of our eyes. And if we don't do something, it's going to be done to us. So we have to, just like I commented about Sir Winston Churchill, it's one of those times when once France fell, we got to see what's going on. And the United States is in a really bad position. And it's time for the United Kingdom to pay attention to what's going on here and take decisive action.
Yeah. Can I quickly add to that, Mike?
Yep.
What we're seeing in this country now is actually, it goes on to both of what Fred and Robin have just mentioned, that the democracy in this country is actually under attack. And in the States, they had Antifa, which was pretty much a homegrown terrorist organization by the end of it. And we are seeing seeds of that happening here now. We have these organizations which are all interlinked. People like Hope Not Hate, Stand Up to Racism, they're all connected to the Socialist Workers' Party. And so we've got these very far left organizations which are attacking venues of other parties. They're, threatening venues. So we're seeing, basically there is no far right political party in this country. But what we do have is some very active far left organizations which are scaring people, frightening people into believing that the bogeyman is out there, that there is a large far right aspect to this country, because they need there to be for them to actually exist. And what these organizations are doing is getting a lot of money out of people under the premise that there is a far right uprising in this country, which is simply not true. So we are seeing these organizations which are actually describing other parties, but actually what they're using to describe us is how they are acting by actually intimidation and shutting down democracy. So we do need to be careful.
We've run out of time. Alan, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do or about reform or stuff like that, how do they do that?
We have a website, so just go to reformuk.com and you'll find it.
Fantastic. Or look for Nigel. And Robin, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do and your things in life, ask you about those guns, those muskets behind you. I'm sure they'll be snapped up by the UK military. Maybe not. But how do they find out more about you?
Yes, so I'm on Twitter, at Robin Tilbrook. And there's also a website for the English Democrats, which is englishdemocrats.party, and for the Workers of England Union, workersofengland.co.uk.
And Fred, if somebody wants to find out more about you or about your book, A Few Bad Men, the true story of US Marines ambushed in Afghanistan and then betrayed in America, how do they find out more about you?
Just search the website, commandoshow.com, and they'll be able to find everything there.
Enjoy Hawaii. It must be almost 10 o'clock, Joe, just past 10 for you.
Yes.
You'll have to have a Mai Tai.
Yes.
Yesterday, I'm still jealous.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm in the in summer in Australia, but Hawaii would be one of the great places of the entire planet. Look after it, Fred. Thank you very much, folks, for being part of the Protagonists. This is The World Today.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
For The World Today, this is James O'Neill. U.S. negotiators have reportedly pressed Ukraine to fully withdraw from parts of Donbass it still controls as a condition for future security guarantees, according to the Financial Times. Sources said Washington indicated guarantees would depend on a peace deal, potentially requiring withdrawal from Donetsk and Lugansk, which voted to join Russia in 2022. The U.S. also reportedly suggested increased weapon support in peacetime if Ukraine accepted the terms. The White House denied forcing territorial concessions. Ukrainian officials expressed uncertainty about U.S. security commitments, despite President Volodymyr Zelensky saying guarantees are 100% ready. The issue was discussed during recent trilateral talks involving Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. China's leadership appears to be accelerating a political purge within the People's Liberation Army following the removal of senior military figures Zhang Yuzhe and Lu Zhenli, according to sources cited by the Epoch Times. Insiders say the two have been secretly detained and accused not primarily of corruption, but of attempting to split the Central Military Commission, a charge implying disloyalty to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The moves have reportedly put the PLA on high alert, with tightened controls and heightened propaganda emphasizing political loyalty. Analysts say the purge reflects a broader effort to consolidate command authority ahead of the PLA's 100th anniversary, with anti-corruption serving as a tool to eliminate rival power networks within the military. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte warned that Europe cannot defend itself without U.S. support, saying the idea that it could do so independently is unrealistic.
Reached by all NATO countries now at the end of 2025 would never, ever, ever have happened without Trump. Do you really think that Spain and Italy and Belgium and Canada would have decided to move from 1.5 to 2%? Italy spending 10 billion more now on defense at the beginning of the year without President Trump? No way, it would not have happened. And do you really think that in The Hague we would have come to the 5% commitment without President Trump? No way.
German MP Sarah Wagenknecht has warned that the EU's decision to ban Russian gas imports will accelerate economic decline and deepen dependence on the United States. EU member states approved legislation requiring an end to Russian gas imports, including LNG, with the full pipeline ban taking effect by September 30, 2027. Wagenknecht said the move would lock Europe into reliance on more expensive U.S. fracking gas, calling the bloc a trampled worm. Since 2022, the EU has sharply reduced Russian energy supplies, increased dependence on U.S. LNG, and contributing to higher prices, rising living costs, and weaker industrial competitiveness. Hungary and Slovakia oppose the ban and plan legal challenges. A report by the Interparliamentary Alliance on China says Beijing has established at least 75 covert influence outposts across the UK. According to the findings, the groups operate within universities, businesses, and Chinese migrant communities, often presenting themselves as cultural organizations while allegedly working to silence critics, influence political debate, and access institutions. Some have been linked to targeting dissidents, including Hong Kong activists. The report also raises concerns about recruitment of academics with access to sensitive technology. Its release comes amid criticism that Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is overly accommodating to China, including approving a large Chinese embassy in London and preparing for Starmer's visit to Beijing. Retired Navy Captain Brent Sadler joined Fox and Friends to discuss the arrival of U.S. carrier strike group in the Middle East.
Perhaps up to 30,000 Iranian protesters executed, 20 in prisons facing imminent execution as this large armada is starting to form. And all of a sudden, the regime now wants to start to talk. So it really, I think the ball's in Tehran's court to see what comes next. Either a good offer that can be taken or the hammer.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Nothing here. And imagine coming in here and you've got a child to bring in as well. Imagine trying to make it a home for them because they've got to share it as well. And this is an imprint for their future. So you can see what this place is like. We wander across in my room. As you can see, there's very little space. His bed to make him comfortable, pictures on the walls. That's my own cupboard I had to bring in. Well, it's Friday night. It's almost 11 o'clock. There's been a major row or something like that occurring in the other end of the block. I've got nowhere to go to, so I'm here with my son. This weekend, there was a little bit of aggravation. Okay, a lot of shouting and things like that, right? How did that make you feel?
Bit annoyed.
Why did it make you annoyed?
Because of shouting, bad words and stuff.
I really need to get out of this place.
Did you know they plan to build over 3,000 wind turbines on Queensland's Great Dividing Range? Over 3,700 kilometres of new haulage roads will carve through old growth forest. Destroying forests for industrial renewables makes no sense. It doesn't have to be this way. The intact biodiverse ranges of Queensland are no place for renewables. Take 2 minutes to learn the truth about the destruction they cause. Go to rainforestreserves.org.au.
This will include the largest ever rollout of live facial recognition technologies across England and Wales. We know this approach works.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And welcome back to the World Today. Mike Ryan here. Enjoyed the protagonists very, very much indeed. And guests from not only from the UK, but from Hawaii. Harry Miller is CEO of Fair Cop, and he's our next guest. On January 25, between 2,000 and 3,000 locals marched through East Sussex's Crowborough to oppose the Home Office use of the discussed Crowborough training camp for up to 500 single adult male asylum seekers aged 18 to 65. The first 27 men arrived on January 22, just over a week ago, as part of the Labor government's effort to cut hotel costs from a level of £9 million daily. Residents worry about safety for women and children, lack of consultation, and policing expenses topping 5.6 million quid. The Home Office points to 24/7 security, NHS care, and support services. For many reasons, the site is inappropriate and legal action could follow. Our guest, as I said, is Harry Miller. We'll talk to Harry about some of these issues, including public safety. And Harry, by the way, is a former police officer and now the co-chief executive officer at Fair Cop, a group of individuals who have come together over shared concerns about police attempts to criminalise people for expressing opinions that don't contravene any laws. Harry, thanks for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, my friend. I always enjoy your show.
Thank you very much. I'm just thinking what actually, not what I'm thinking, what was the government thinking about deciding to make a ex-military camp into a place where they're going to plonk a whole bunch of many undocumented migrants? And they talk about security. How the hell will they control, 800 plus migrants as it grows?
Well, they won't. That's the whole point. They're not going to control it at all, are they? I mean, on a practical point of view, I can see why they do use old army work, army camps, because the buildings are already there, there's structure and all the rest of it. But it sends a message, doesn't it? I think that's the larger point. It sends a message that this government doesn't value the military. It certainly doesn't value its veterans. It looks down upon its veterans, when it's not, of course, seeking to prosecute them for so-called indiscretions and war crimes from the past. And it sends the very clear message that if you want to be treated as a first-class citizen in this country, get housing, get access to medical care, get security, feel safe, get food and water, get clothing, get a mobile phone, get it all paid for, then the best thing that you can do is fly over to France, pay somebody to get you on a small boat and bring you back, destroy your passport on the way, come back and then claim that you are fleeing some war-torn part of the world, and you'll get looked after entirely. And then even worse, anybody that protests this, anybody who says, hold on a minute, this is perhaps not a good idea, anybody that dares go out onto the street as part of an organised process, you'll be treated as a second-class citizen, and the police will view you as a criminal or a potential criminal. And of course, you may end up getting free accommodation as well, but that will be at His Majesty's pleasure down at the local police station, followed by jail. This is where we're at. We are in a complete and utter upside down world in Britain right now, and I think increasingly, I think this is more by design than by accident. I used to think that it was all accidental. I used to think it was by the result of just sheer incompetence, good people being rubbish at their jobs. I'm less inclined to think that now, because it just keeps happening and happening and happening. And the government and the police don't seem to be learning any lessons at all. So I conclude reluctantly there is a degree of conspiracy going on here, that this is by design, not by accident.
And just the talk of vigilante groups would make any cop a bit nervous, because you have these large groups of people, most likely with good intentions, but it can get out of hand. The law should be left to the cops, but if you're forming a vigilante group, would mean that you haven't got a whole lot of faith in law and order.
Well, that's probably. I mean, I'm entirely against vigilante groups. I think that's a road to hell, in all honesty. And let's be clear: regular police officers want to do regular policing. Police officers, by and large, join the job because they want to feel the collar of the bad guy and lock them up. They want to go out there and keep the public safe. That's why most police officers join up. The problem is, once you're joined up, you're then subject to a non-stop series of propagandizing, where looking after the general public becomes secondary to something much more sinister, much more ideological, and much more political. And so even good cops end up, unfortunately, subject to the ideological nuances and agenda of the chief constable of the government, etc. But vigilante groups are not the way to go. What we need to do is we need police forces, chief constables, to recognise that protesting is a fundamental part of being democratic. If you're in a healthy democracy, you have the right to protest. Now, we know what an unhealthy democracy or a no democracy looks like by looking over at Iran, where there's been something like, I don't know, what was the last figure that I saw? Something like 20,000 protesters slaughtered by the regime simply because they went out and protested. So one of the marks of any healthy democracy, any healthy state, is that the police not only allow the public to demonstrate, but make it safe for them to do so. We have another problem in this country right now, where the police think that keeping people safe is the be-all and end-all. That's the reason why there was mooted for the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans being banned from attending a football match in Birmingham on the basis of safety. Last year, we had a Jew who was arrested on his own doorstep because he stepped out of his house just as a parade of pro-Palestinians were passing by, and the police arrested the Jew for his own safety. Well, it's not the job of the police to ensure safety. The best way of keeping everybody safe is to ban all public gatherings and to have a curfew. No, it's the job of the police to allow people to go about their lawful business, whether that's leaving your front door and crossing the street whilst there's a protest going on, or being, in fact, part and parcel of a protest. It's the job of the police to facilitate that and to reduce the risk. It's not the job of the police to keep everybody 100% safe, because that's impossible. And the cost of doing that, of course, is a complete and utter restriction of our freedoms. But the police don't seem to understand this.
Tell me if I'm wrong here. Your departments are, you got uniform, you got plainclothes, which are detectives. Then you have Scotland Yard, which is a bit like the FBI, I suppose.
No. Scotland Yard is basically the detective agency of the Metropolitan Police.
Okay, so
it doesn't have a national remit, no.
Okay, I'll have to. Lucky my dad's not alive. He would have footed me up the backside for getting that one wrong. But so you have Scotland Yard, and then to back that up, you've got MI5, which looks after internal issues. Can you tell me why the government's looking at having a British FBI?
Well, again, we've already got a so-called British FBI. In 2013, the government set up the National Crime Agency, which was touted as being the British FBI. The problem with the National Crime Agency is nobody knows really what it is or what it does. It's never entered the national consciousness. I don't really think politicians view it as particularly important. So it's got a huge budget. I think it's got a budget of around about 890 million quid. But what does it do? What does it do? None of us really know. So I think what the Home Office, they've looked and thought, this great idea, it doesn't seem to have worked. I know. Let's have a reboot, and this time we'll call it the British FBI. I think that's what's going on here. But again, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. We don't have an American federal system in this country. We have 43 individual police forces. What we do need, if we want to tackle national crime, grooming gangs, fraud, conspiracies, etc., then we need chief constables to talk to each other. We need Scotland Yard down in the Met to talk to the CID departments in the non-metropolitan police forces. But they don't. Police forces in this country are notorious for not sharing information. They're notorious for keeping the intelligence to themselves. They're very territorial. And that's one of the things that needs to stop. But that's as much about culture and practice. I don't think we need a brand new agency to sort that out. The other thing, of course, is by having an FBI, a federal type police force, it fundamentally changes the nature of policing, because policing in the UK, it's not government led, it's people led. We don't have a Home Secretary who directs the police. We have chief constables who direct their own police forces, and so I'm quite reluctant to promote the idea of having a national government-led, Home Secretary-led police force, because I think it shifts us in a direction that I don't want to go. That we increase the risk of the police force becoming a political entity rather than an entity of the public, which serves the public and helps to detect crime. Now, I'm open to persuasion on this, Mike. I really am. I'm not an absolute fundamentalist, but I'm yet to see an argument for a British FBI when we have the model of the NCA, the National Crime Agency, which has failed.
Okay, so I'll read this to you. The National Police Service, NPS, will fight complex and serious crime, such as terrorism, fraud, and organised crime, in order to give overstretched local forces more time to focus on everyday offences, such as hello, shoplifting and phone theft. The NPS will, now you just behave yourself, just tie yourself to the chair. The NPS will combine the work of the National Crime Agency and regional organised crime units under one super force. So we have the boys in blue. What they'll be doing is making sure there are less shoplifters on the street and shops, and no more phone theft. Just from this alone, it would seem that they have sort of patted down the seriousness of crime and some of the crime, because to say shoplifting and phone theft is what the boys in blue will do now is a bit demeaning, because I thought they would have done more than just stop people from shoplifting or stealing your phone.
Yeah, again, that's a straw man argument, because there is not a police officer in the UK who thinks, "Oh my goodness, what do I do? Today, am I going to be tackling county lines gangs or shall I go down and deal with local shop theft?" That's not how policing works. It's frontline police officers, response officers, who deal with the everyday crimes that you and I are concerned with. These officers who are involved in the big, large, organised crime, they don't spend any time at all. They're not available to go down to see the local shopkeeper because there's been a burglary or a shoplifting. That's a nonsense argument. What we need to do is we definitely do need a joined up national agency of some description, not directed by the Home Office, but directed by chief constables who are working together so they can get the job done. But it's the local response officer who goes out and deals with the everyday crime. And the reason that one of the ways that we free them up to do that is by getting rid of the endless paperwork that they have to do, by withdrawing them from being frontline mental health nurses, because that's what happens for most officers. They start their shift, and then there's some lunatic kicking off and claiming to have a mental health crisis, and all that needs to happen is for them to say, "Oh, I feel a little bit suicidal." And then they have to take the police officer then has to take them to hospital. Now hospitals are overstretched, so the police officer then spends a full 12-hour shift babysitting the person that thinks they've got mental health problems. And of course, it's that officer who should be out there visiting the person who's been recently burgled or the person who's been shoplifted. But they can't, because they're on babysitting duties. So we need to sort that out. The other thing that we need to sort out is in this country we have, I think it's 150,000 police officers there or thereabouts. But get this, 4,000 a day are off sick. And then there's another 17,000 who are suspended. That's 1 in 6 police officers that we have on the books who's not available for duty. That's absolutely appalling. So we need to sort that out. Now, of course, if a police officer's done something wrong, then it's right that they are put through disciplinary, of course. But at the moment, it's taking 2 or 3 years to get a police officer through disciplinary. 2 or 3 years where they are on full pay, but not doing a scrap of work. We need to shorten that length of time to 3 months. It's as simple as that. And then you're either bound to have not committed some horrible, gross misconduct, and so you're back on the street, or we get rid of you and replace you with a new copper. That's what needs to happen. Having this new FBI isn't going to solve any of that. So you and I are not going to feel any safer at all. So the answer here, it's a civil service answer. It's a political answer to a very real problem. And of course, politicians and civil servants very often get it wrong, because they're not dealing with life as it is. They're not dealing with policing as it is. They're inventing it from their la land version of policing.
Are you afraid that the UK will be over surveilled? I mean, I just saw that you're plonking all these cameras around run by AI. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, if you have a camera on every corner, and that's what the government is suggesting just about, what's the point of living?
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I'm a recent convert to this, actually, because it's always been my view that, I don't care who surveils me because I'm not doing anything wrong. But my stance has changed quite a lot over the last few years, because I've seen that the government and the police are not politically neutral. They're not necessarily benign, and that information, which is technically, which I suppose in some ways could be seen as neutral, can be weaponized against you. I mean, I back in 2019. I simply wrote on Twitter that men can't become women, and this was surveilled by the police, and I became the subject to a massive police inquiry. I ended up, of course, taking the police to court and winning. But that's not the point. So a few years ago, I couldn't imagine a world where if you weren't doing anything unlawful, the police would take an interest in you. But now, unfortunately, I can. So I think this rush to surveillance is a bad thing. And of course, the government are quite clever, because what they're doing is they're getting you and I to spy on each other. So we saw this during the COVID lockdown, where people were actively encouraged to snitch upon any neighbour that happened to go for an unwarranted walk. Even if you didn't stand on the doorstep on a Thursday night and clap the NHS, there was a chance that a neighbour would notice your absence and report you. So we're not in a position now where we can trust where we can trust the government not to weaponise our neighbour. I mean, Ring doorbells and things like that. Surveillance is all over the place, and of course, the government encourage this because, you need to see, when you're away on a holiday, you need to see who's at your front door. Well, I don't give a toss who's at my front door when I'm on holiday. I don't want to see a Ring doorbell, but these things are becoming absolutely prolific, and of course, the police then are able to secure that intelligence. And there's nowhere you can go, nothing that you can do where you are not being surveilled. And of course, I think that's a terrible thing.
I suppose one good thing, you'll have some much slimmer coppers around, because they'll see how many times they visit McDonald's. And I can see, because I mean here in Victoria, you always know. You see you've got, what has it got now? Lights and bells or sirens, and they're racing down. They're heading to Macca's because they're about to shut shop or something for the night. Where do you see the future of policing in the UK as we wrap this up?
Well, I've said to you before, I'm an eternal optimist. Actually, Mike, I do weirdly think that our current Home Secretary, albeit that she's a Labour Home Secretary, I think her heart's actually in the right place. I don't think she's a terrible Home Secretary. I think we've had far worse. So, she's recently got rid of non-crime hate incidents, for instance. So she's been very sound on that. I am taking her to court. Of course, we've got a judicial review lodged with the High Court, because we've discovered that police forces are recording people for actual crimes, not non-crimes, but recording people for actual crimes on the basis of no evidence at all, on the basis purely of somebody putting in a complaint that you're a hater. So we're going to take her to court over that, but hopefully we'll get that sorted and we'll get that guidance. Scrapped. So I'm relatively optimistic, but then again, I have to be, because if I wasn't optimistic, I'd pack all this in and just walk away and just watch Netflix
or Prime.
Yeah,
actually, a lot of good English cop shows too. Crime is a good series. A bit Scottish for my liking, if you've ever seen it, but it's because I can't understand what they're saying half the time, but really good.
I like the Swede, Mike. I like it. I like it when coppers are grabbing the bad guys and throwing them over the cortina and saying, "Don't upset me. I've not had my breakfast yet," before sort of nutting them.
I'm going to tell you a really funny story that I'm not supposed to tell anyone. My dad was a copper, and when he first started off in Victoria, he was in headquarters in Melbourne at Russell Street, and anyway, he's only just joined the police force, and he was a young guy there, and all the detectives who were doing the interrogating of this particular guy, the detectives in the 50s, they were very large guys. You wouldn't want to say boo to them. Large guys, not much hair and big necks and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, they grabbed this guy and threw him on the table. Nicely, of course, not. Anyway, he slid out the window, and they grabbed his feet because he was like 16 floors up. So anyway, I thought that was and they yelled out, "Quick, he's trying to escape." So there's a story my dad said, never tell anybody, but I think you could probably relate to that. Do you think cops are better now than they were before?
No, I don't actually. And I think that's not the cops' fault. I think that's because they've been overburdened with a load of nonsense by complete idiot bosses. I mean, a police officer's only got so much storage capacity in their brain, And when it's been taken over with diversity, equality, and inclusion nonsense, then there's no room in there for learning, the definitions of law, for instance. I can still remember definitions of crimes, and police officers should be able to say off pat, on demand, the definition for all the most common crimes that they are dealing with. They can't. What they can tell you, of course, is their pronouns. What they can tell you, of course, is when it's Transgender Day of Remembrance, because their heads have been filled with this complete utter crap, and it comes at the expense of understanding what the law is and what their duty is to uphold the law. It's their duty. It's the police officer's duty to uphold the law. It's not the police officer's duty to uphold pronouns, to uphold politics, to uphold guidance. It's not their role, but police officers don't understand that, and it's not the young'un's fault. It's
Are
the
they
boss's.
caught in the last question, very serious here, part of the intensive training would be how to say hello, hello, hello. Is that about right?
Well, of course, you don't get a chance to say hello, hello, hello anymore because police officers aren't, as a rule, encouraged to meet members of the public.
And very true too, very true. You would have liked my dad. He told a few porkies, but most of it was true. Harry Miller, CEO of Fair Cop. If somebody wants to find out more about you or Fair Cop, how do they do that?
Just go onto X and look up We Are Fair Cop. You'll find us on there.
Harry, always a pleasure. Got to do this more often now that we have longer hours. Harry Miller, thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today.
Makers are facing more traffic.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
And back, yesterday we had a great conversation, and it was cut short. We just ran out of time with Robert Sibis talking about alternative media, independent media, how they're all over the place. Robert, by the way, is a producer, director, and author of films, documentaries, and TV shows, as well as a book publisher and editor-in-chief of Oval Media. Now, he's made his mission to convey a new perspective on power mechanics. His goal is to foster active citizenship by providing a deeper understanding of the world through a variety of media. Robert, thanks for joining us once again.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Mike.
Tell me, because we're talking about independent media, which is more dangerous in this day and age, independent or alt media all legacy media.
You mean dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, which can do more damage, because at least with legacy we know where we know who the villains are. Mainly, we know that they're funded by a lot of organisations we don't really like. Independent media, we don't know who funds them, so therefore their agenda or their narrative, many times is it follows the direction or the directive from those providing the funds.
It is true that you have hidden players everywhere, also in what is called alternative media. And it is true that you have hidden players in legacy media too, and you have different kinds of people. So there are people who just believe what the government says, and this portion of our population is decreasing, getting smaller every day. So there's a problem, and that problem, I mean, for the dominating narrative, and people become critical, but the people who are in charge, who are giving, this main narrative, are not stupid. They have advice. They know how to deal with dissent. At least there are strategies, and these strategies are to control the dissent too. So you just and this is why sometimes what sounds like criticism is in fact a diversion of attention. Sometimes I just give you a simple example. Instead of saying, look, this technocracy is a problem, or this transhumanism is in fact anti-humanism, and can be dangerous to our health, can be dangerous to our liberties, you would say the problem is the digital world. Everything which is digital is a problem. And in fact, that is not true. See what you are doing, Mike. Your work is digital. And because we have these digital means, we have means for democracy, for debate, for open-mindedness, means to think faster, to get information out faster, to research easier. So in fact, I think that digitalization of the world is an extremely liberating, and is giving us freedom. So that's a problem for some people, because some people have an agenda which is in fact putting us into a tiny system, putting us into a world with less freedom and more control. And they, of course, want to use these tools against us. But it's not the problem are not the tools. So this is just one example, but there are a lot of examples where, and I just had this conversation with my partner, saying, Karl Marx, you remember this guy? He said the problem is the industrialization of the world, and this makes the workers to slaves, which is not true. The industrialization and modern technology gave wealth to a lot of people, to a broader part of the population, and it gave also more importance to the workers, because the owners of the factories were in a way also dependent to the workers. So compared to the system before the industrial world, the regular citizen had more power. And this is, so it is not true. I think that Karl Marx maybe was not that honest, in fact, even though, yes, at the end, the people who had the power, that shouldn't be, used their power to build a system in which, and today, if we talk about today, the digital world is still under control. And the world is now more under control than it has been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I do. And I think in the EU, throughout Europe, the democracy shield to protect its citizens from this barrage of misinformation. How dangerous is that?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I couldn't even fathom what is happening here. I mean, you might have heard of the case of Jacques Baud, the Swiss citizen who has frozen assets, bank accounts frozen, is not allowed to move anymore. He lives in Brussels, and he is the perfect example of a good journalist, because he is documenting everything he's saying, and he's using, interestingly, mostly Western sources to describe what is happening in Ukraine, and it's still extremely critical. I mean, this is why it's dangerous, because his publications are based on facts. And to attack this guy saying, look, what you are doing is Russian propaganda, is, of course, weird. In addition to this, even if it did do Russian propaganda, even if it would be pro-Putin and whatever, it would not, of course, give the European Commission the right to express sanctions against the Swiss citizen. It's completely absurd. I have the right to defend Putin if I were in a democracy. You know, I could have these opinions. It is not illegal to like somebody or to dislike somebody. It's not even illegal to love somebody or to hate somebody. So to call this is, of course, why is the European Commission doing this? The main reason is that it's having a strong impression on everybody else. So it's frightening people saying, look, if I now would say Putin might be right on this or that, I will be sanctions or I will have other problems. And the fact that this is so anti-constitutional, that this is so illegal, in fact, what the European Commission is doing, is in fact part of this narrative. They can do everything. They will get away with everything. So I cannot oppose them because they don't respect their own laws.
And I'm just thinking it's pretty hard out there if you think about it. You got, on one hand, you got government trying to do all they can to stop you from talking, shut you up, and then on the other hand, you have for example, look at X, free speech platform, and you can say what you like. What they do is distort the actual facts. So therefore, if it's selective speech, so if you're on the same wavelength as say Elon is, then you will maybe enjoy some of the riches or some of the notoriety by having good numbers. Look at us, for example. I don't know whether we'll ever get to 400. It's been bobbing around on 90 for 390. Can you believe it? Yeah. And we were part of TNT radio, TNT, and we took we just moved it across. Now, in that time, TNT had X. It reached 12,300 about 2 years before it stopped, and it stayed on 12,300.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing happened to us. And Mike, what you are doing is free speech, and what X is doing is, in fact, a diversion. I mean, if I would start every post with a praise of Elon Musk, I would get chances, of having more visibility. If, however, I would criticize him, it's a problem. And we had the same issues. And no, they do content filtering, and this is not my research result, which would be investigative. They're saying it themselves. It's not neutral at all, and they're not claiming to be so. It is the same thing. You have this Pepsi and Coke story. You have this, red and blue and black and white. This opposition between X and let's say Facebook and other platforms is not the real opposition. It is not giving real freedom of thinking. It is important for people to really understand that if you want to have free thinking, you need really independent platforms, and they are rare, and they're getting so rare. And I think what you are doing is free, and one means also to attack a platform is to do as if nobody would see it. So then you would, if you had millions of views on various American platforms, you can say, look, you have to come to our show, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister, and they would come because you have this audience. So maybe you have this audience, but they can, trick with the platforms, and then they say, look, you're small, you're not important, and there's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, are you important, are you unimportant? It depends on how you're perceived on their platforms, and this is something we have to change. We have to, if we want real independence in debate and in thinking, we shouldn't depend our judgment on what is written on Wikipedia or how many followers you have on X.
Yeah, we have on X. I got tired one day and I was told, don't be stupid, I can't help it. Sometimes I like to call it as it is. And we actually, in our little description, the world today looks very pretty. And I said, we are tier 1 on X, which means X would like us to disappear or jump into a volcano. And that's about, but that's what it is. And we went,
it means so you're relevant.
Well, Rob said the same thing. Said we were extreme. We were an extreme organisation from right back to TNT, and we were extreme. We had both sides having a voice, and they didn't like that. So we're either extreme for one or the other. So it never worked out for us. What was funny though, the people we employed, they were just brilliant. But most of them had been deplatformed and on Twitter and Facebook and all those, YouTube, and they're doing well right now, and we're not. We would never be able to get away from those algorithms. YouTube's another one, until you can afford to have store your own videos and stuff, which we're hopefully getting there, but I don't think so at times. But it's really interesting that that YouTube. We actually were watching it one day, and our numbers were, we hit 20 because we don't believe the numbers at all, and we're talking about trans issues, in Australia, and when we saw it, that the number went up, because said nobody's watching you. It's a very hot topic, so they were, and the people we had on were very, very good, but it got to 23 and then went down to 20. And then got up to 24, went down to 20. And then we saw these, and then even with, Jen was watching something the other night, and she told me, she said, look, this is I'm seeing our numbers disappear. And another one we had, went to bed last night, it was like 700 or something, or 680 or something. And it had dropped about 40. And views don't just disappear. I mean, it's a view. So I think if they want to get you, I mean, we're not liked by, we weren't liked, or we're not liked now by legacy media, government, and a lot of people on the alt media side, because we just don't play the games. It's the same thing with you. I mean, if you don't follow a clueless person's agenda, and then they want to come back and create havoc for you, they can. So we're, no matter what we do, at times we're going to be bashed on the head, and we're going to be buried, and petrol poured over us and stuff. And I think, well, all we can do is just tell it as it is. Quality of our program is pretty bloody good, I think. But according to, and even Rumble, we had Dolores Cahill on when we were at Asia Pacific Today, and Dolores had like 450,000 views. I checked it, a year later. You just want to go back and admire your handiwork, and it was like 250. So they knocked off like 200,000. So all the social medias that we all rely on, you are subject to their censorship, aren't you?
Oh yes, we all are, and it's really impressive, because what you're describing is in fact a dangerous game. It could, it could happen that people would see it. So the question is, why are you so important? Why is your work so important, Mike? And I was quite prepared to understand this because in 2019 I started filming with Chinese dissidents in Berlin, and I was very much impressed, for instance, how much persecution a bookseller would have because he would sell books by poets, and how poets would be put into a horrible prison and would need to stay there and would be raped there and would sleep on the floor with tens and tens of people. It was just a nightmare of their life and said, just because you wrote a poem, you know? And in fact, yes, because if the government is implementing measures which are obviously against the interest of everybody, or nearly everybody in the country, then just to think, just to have a second opinion, just to have a little bit of freedom in the discussion can be a huge problem, because information travels fast, especially in the digital age. So they have to, you know, inhibit your job and maybe also mine at the earliest stage possible, because they know you can be dangerous, Mike, and what you're doing. And this is the thing. The viewers have to see this too, that thinking is dangerous, and that the prohibition of thinking is in fact the result to it. And you know, the question is, what is happening? What is so much against the common interest? You know, I think we are in a disruptive era where you know, the structures of governments are completely revolved, where we have different responsibilities, new laws, and more centralization of power, and where we have, you know, also a new center of world power, which will be rather in, you know, China than in other areas. But this is not really changing the dominating people. I think mainly the domination in China makes China a tool, but still to the same people who dominated the world before. So these kind of information, these kind of thoughts are rare, even in alternative media. And I think it is because people are influencing alternative media. Yesterday, we had an interesting discussion, and because we said, look, it's not just about platforms, it's also about people who would then, you know, either do sabotage to media, you know, occupy their thoughts, occupy their time, people who would come to work saying they would like to help, and then they're not helping but hindering, you know, the progress of projects. You have a lot of tiny things, and I needed months and months to understand that people would take the energy to fight what I would do. I mean, how important am I? I mean, just one person, you know, or we are just this little team. But then I learned, you know, more and more about what happened in Eastern Germany during the dictatorship, while we had the Cold War. And in fact, they had people paid full time to just observe a painter who would have exhibits in his town, you know, a small multiplier of ideas, and it would be enough to pay people to observe him. I think, you know, what a waste of energy. No, it's not, because you cannot have dissent if the government works against everybody.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild world out there, isn't it? And we, and you know yourself, there's people would like to release some stories in print and stuff, which we've chatted about off camera, but you know, we have to be very careful, because you know, we ain't got deep pockets. But I think though one day, and these people that, you know, probably watching, because we looked at our stats last night, it was amazing. People in London, of course, which is fine, and in Thailand. A couple of people there, they were watching it. So I wonder, anyway, must be because you have something
funny.
It must be.
I mean, I like to be watched. That's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Look at me. Look at me.
You know, to my defense, you know, most of my media work, I did it behind the camera. You know, it was just in 2020 when we got attacked that I said to myself, I had to talk. I had to, you know, I have to ask questions being filmed, and people need to know me, because then they can't attack me anymore. So no, I'm happy if I'm not watched too. I just like to do media work, and it is it is true. We are watched. It's really, but take it as a compliment, Mike. It just says what you do is relevant. I mean, that's a good feeling, isn't it?
It will all come out, but at the meantime, we have to eat. And it's very hard. So, and it's very hard. I can tell you now, Robert, it's a very hard life at the moment. Because we just about met every as they would say in Australia, we met just about every bastard you could find. And they did some terrible, terrible things to us. We didn't say a word, but one day we will, and not too far down the track. But more important things, we need to make sure that we keep going and, that you do the right thing by people.
You're right. I mean, this lawfare is a weapon. I experienced this. Yesterday I thought a little bit about it. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose, but if you go into a conflict before a tribunal and you have to pay a lawyer, I mean, it can already bankrupt you, or at least take all your means. And this is hindering projects to progress. It is so simple if a person has a lot of money to hinder you what you do. It's impressive. It's really impressive.
It's a scary life. We need to do this on a regular basis. Reaction.
Yes, I'd be happy.
If somebody wants to, did this last night, like deja vu. If somebody wants to find out more about you, Robert, how do they do that?
Yeah, we still have our website, oval.media, but I'm also on all other platforms, even though we might be more shadow banned. So I have a Substack, and we also have, we can find us everywhere. Best is to go to our mailing list, and best is to subscribe.
And have a scotch if you can afford it. Robert Sibis from Oval Media, thank you so much for your time. That's about it, folks, for yet another exciting episode of The Protagonist and The World Today. Catch you again tomorrow, same time, same place, same telephone box, God willing, and have a great night or a great day. This is The World Today.